We're coming off of a Super Bowl this past week in the National Football League, and how essentially, we can relate that, maybe to wrestling or maybe not related to wrestling. But I'll start off with this. The Super Bowl this past week was in Las Vegas. We already remember the press conference for WWE was last week in Las Vegas. A lot of rumors and talk. Obviously Minneapolis was a strong front runner for WrestleMania next year, but some are starting to talk about Las Vegas. Now, my question to you is, if WrestleMania 41's in Las Vegas, do you think it was a huge missed opportunity that they didn't announce it at the press conference last week, or do you think that's a no story?
No story. I'm not too concerned about it. We have so much going on right now. I feel like it would fall, it would kind of go to the background, so to speak, because of everything that is going on with The Rock, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Cody Rhodes. Like, that whole conference was, as we recorded last week, that was pretty insane. Like, we had a lot of interesting dialogue right after it, our initial emotional thoughts about it. And obviously we are, we're now post that at this point. But it hasn't died down. Like, I mean, even The Rock is putting stuff out there on social media saying, pretty much saying like the next few days there's going to be another big announcement, which I think it was on Raw. I think he's alluding to. So
well, it's February 19th. I'm guessing it's something to do more or less with his like energy brand. Because I did see the commercial. I did see a commercial and stuff, and says a huge announcement. And a lot of times when any of these people, specifically Tony Khan, says huge announcement, it always seems to be not exactly that. I'm yet to see anyone make a huge announcement and it really be something that floors me, like a jaw-dropping announcement. It's normally something like, oh, we're getting 2-for-1 Zoa drinks, or no sugar variety, or I don't know, something of that age. I think they're already
a new flavor or something.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean you're probably right. I mean, regarding it, I didn't see any Zoa. I don't drink Zoa, so I don't follow the brand, so to speak. But I am curious to see what's going to happen over the next few weeks going into, well, actually this week coming up for Elimination Chamber, but also not too far in the distance is WrestleMania. So we're not that far away. WrestleMania is around the corner.
I will say, because this is kind of late, WWE, they used to have it where obviously you'd find out the next year's WrestleMania at WrestleMania, but WWE has been jumping the gun, especially with, the COVID years where they were really, going straight out and telling you where they were for the next couple of years. So, WWE normally by now we know where the next WrestleMania is, because a lot of times too, they kind of like we already know, like going to WrestleMania last year, the commercials that came up for Philly, I was well aware, right? And even the previous year, because of COVID and the announcements, we knew they were going to LA. Philly, I want to say, might be one of in history the longest, maybe WrestleMania 20 might be one of the longest when it comes to announcements. Because we already knew about Philly, not just at last year's WrestleMania, but October 2022, the return of Bray Wyatt at Extreme Rules. So a good 6 months before WrestleMania last year, we knew WrestleMania was in Philly. Not just knew it, but they revealed the logo at Extreme Rules 2022. So Extreme Rules 2022, October, early October, we knew the logo for WrestleMania in 2024. So that was definitely a big time. So essentially, that would be like, I don't know where the pay-per-view was, Payback. I think Payback was, and Payback and Fastlane were just this past fall. So that would be like if they revealed the WrestleMania 41 logo in Indianapolis at Fastlane when they were just in Indianapolis, which, I mean, kind of to put things in perspective, I don't think that's a horrible place to have a WrestleMania. Indianapolis, Lucas Oil Field. I think that's definitely a potential.
And here's the thing too. Not even just for like a wrestling event, but Indianapolis has shown over the years, whether it's the NCAA tournament, Super Bowls, any major events, that's a great city to do all those things. Like they put on a great show. I mean, obviously Pat McAfee has a lot of connections in Indianapolis as he's a former Colt, and he still resides.
You say that, and Pat McAfee did come out at Fastlane, and I was sitting there thinking, because like the whole John Cena came out at Money in the Bank and did a little WrestleMania thing. I think Pat McAfee alluded to at Fastlane, if I remember, about WrestleMania in Indianapolis being a WrestleMania caliber city, but no like announcements were made. We did the John Cena at Money in the Bank. We did the Pat McAfee at Indianapolis, but no announcements on WrestleMania. The front runner essentially has been Minneapolis, solely based on the stadium there, the new stadium, the nice stadium. Minneapolis is a big city, and it gets a lot of these events because of their indoor stadiums. Buffalo, we all know the Buffalo Bills, they're building a new stadium, and it's going to be an outdoor stadium, but I don't think they're dropping the ball when it comes to that, because that's not really a major league city in that regard, right? So they're not losing out on any potential events. I think, to me personally, and I don't understand this at all, how in Chicago, right? How we don't have a domed stadium in Chicago, not because of the weather for the Bears or any of these teams, but because WrestleMania, back when it was in Chicago, yeah, it went to the arenas, but WrestleMania's grown up, and the Super Bowl has always been the Super Bowl, and the Final Four's even grown up, because I remember as a little kid, the NCAA Final Four being in arenas before it moved into domes. So we're at a point where, like, if Chicago had a domed stadium, they would be the front runner for every national thing coming. I mean, WrestleMania would return to Chicago. That's the only reason. It's crazy to think WrestleMania Chicago, it was there so many years. It was there for WrestleMania 2, WrestleMania 13, WrestleMania 22. So it was there for a bunch of WrestleManias. And the only reason they haven't returned is because they've moved on to stadiums. And because they've moved on to stadiums, essentially Chicago is now out of the loop because of that fact.
Here's what I would say too, though. Like, just to add to the I want to go back to Indianapolis really quick. I mean, Lucas Oil Stadium, the home the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, they're 70,000 seats. I mean, the Colts put on, the Colts have a good size stadium. And here's the other thing too. As we're talking about this, as we're recording this week, the NBA is actually in town in Indianapolis for the All-Star weekend. So you're seeing another big event in Indianapolis. So for me, like, if I had to choose Minneapolis versus Indianapolis, I'm going Indianapolis. That would be me. I think they're going Minneapolis.
I do think, I mean, they're probably pretty similar cities when it comes to size, right? And I will say, I think Minneapolis might be a little bit bigger than Indianapolis. I could be wrong. But I don't, when it comes to the cachet of both cities, I think they're pretty much on par with each other. The NBA, I think, is in Indianapolis.
That's what they are. They're big Midwest cities.
And the NBA could go to Minneapolis for the All-Star game. That's the thing. The All-Star game doesn't need that stadium. It's going to wherever, like, it's a team thing.
It's going to go where the Pacers play, yeah.
It's going to go, where the NBA team in that city plays. So it goes to Toronto, it goes to Minneapolis.
But the point is, though, Indianapolis can host the WrestleMania, and I don't think anybody's going to break a sweat over it because they know how to throw big events together. I firmly believe in the next 5 years, WrestleMania will be in Indianapolis. I would bet a good chunk of change on that. It doesn't make sense for me to not think that. I don't think WWE would not think about it, considering how great of a city it is. They host big events, and last time I checked, Pat McAfee's got a little bit of pull in that city, so I feel like he can make some deals, get some deals done if he needed to.
I do think WWE, when it comes to Las Vegas, it's a great city and stuff, but they did kind of muddy the waters a little bit for the fact that they obviously had SummerSlam at Allegiant Stadium. One of the first events open to the public was that SummerSlam at Allegiant Stadium, and then they tried returning and then couldn't sell the tickets. So it, like, reminds you a little of that WrestleMania 7 thing where they're like, oh, we were supposed to be at that stadium, but there was a terrorist threat. No, there wasn't the demand. And right now, WWE's got a lot of demand. And I think it even had a demand then. You didn't have 35,000. I don't even know today if you have 35,000 seat demand for Money in the Bank. I mean, they're showing it since the last 2 Money in the Banks after that have been in arenas, even when they went to London, which is to me, it's ridiculous. They tried getting 35,000 for Money in the Bank in the United States, where you can go to Money in the Bank more frequently, or any WWE pay-per-view. And then they couldn't get the demand. So they go to England, where you have the demand, where if you want to put Money in the Bank in a stadium, or as we're learning with Elimination Chamber, in a stadium, very easily, not based on the cachet of the event, but based on just the demand. We're talking England, the O2 Arena could have gotten, would have sold out similarly for Payback or Fastlane or any event, right? Mm-hmm. They were just clamoring. So Wembley Stadium could have gotten 35,000 for Money in the Bank. They would have got 35,000 for Payback. They would have got 35,000 for WrestleMania Backlash, right? It's just, and then you decide to go to the arena, right? So it is kind of weird to me that, they tried going to Las Vegas and it didn't work out. And then they go to England, and now they're going to Toronto, and they're not doing stadiums, they're doing arenas, when I think actually now in those markets specifically, they would have a better shot at doing the stadium than they did in Las Vegas. So I don't know why they tried stadium and then backed out.
Well, just speaking of those arenas, did you see the new deal that WWE and UFC put together? They are working on. They have a 5-year deal with a partnership with. I still call it the Arrowhead Pond, but it's the Honda Center in Anaheim, California. They've worked out a 5-year deal to do. I believe it was 3 exclusive events every year. So what are your thoughts on that?
Are they exclusive events for UFC or for WWE?
It says here under the terms of the deal, WWE and UFC will each have 3 shows annually. That's
okay.
Cool.
I mean, WWE is always going there anyways.
Yeah.
That's not like a big thing. So Monday Night Raw is going to Anaheim. So Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, and maybe like another SmackDown going to Anaheim. But I know this weekend, obviously, they're really doing that tie-in where they had a joint ticket for UFC at the Pond on Saturday, and then Monday Night Raw is there Monday, and there's like supposed to be WWE people at the UFC show on Saturday, and then I don't know, maybe vice versa, UFC people at Monday Night Raw. So we're seeing our first essential joint UFC WWE weekend. I think that's great. I think, kind of how we alluded to this thing about the Super Bowl and how they had the press conference in Las Vegas with WWE. Kind of anything that you can do to join up these ventures together. I think it makes the weekends bigger. It's part of the reason why I don't like WrestleMania being 2 nights. I mean, many reasons, but part of that reason is because of I like the diversity of different companies. Now, the difference is with WWE, they're not necessarily partnering with these other companies, so they could care less if AEW and Ring of Honor are making good money WrestleMania weekend on their back. But in this sense, they are partnering with those companies, so they are making it like a joint weekend where it makes it bigger, right? If you have UFC people and WWE people separate and they're coming to town, you got 40,000 people, right? You have the Royal Rumble sized crowd coming to the Arrowhead Pond, and it is essentially 40,000 different people. It's not like with WWE shows where it's like maybe back-to-back shows, it's the same crowd. You're getting 20,000 flying in who are pretty much UFC fans and 20,000 flying in who are WWE fans. So you're getting 40,000 unique people, and they're going to mix and mingle and join together, and there's probably some crossover, and for those people that are doing crossover, that's great for them. But there's probably some crossover, and it just makes it a bigger event. I mean, I always personally thought, speaking of other big events, I know you're a big, college basketball kind of person. I always thought that the Final Four, it should be a joint thing. It should be the men and the women on the same place on the same weekend, because they already don't try to go up against each other anyways when it comes to the courts, right? They always, one's doing like Thursday, one's doing Saturday, one's doing Sunday, one's doing Monday, those kind of things. So they could just do it that way with like NCAA men and women's basketball. You have the women's semifinals on Friday, the men's semifinals on Saturday, the women's final on Sunday, the men's final on Monday. And then that way too, because, I know women's basketball, obviously it's starting to grow a little more as of late, but it is not up to par where it's going to fill a stadium. But if you're getting people who are there for the men's game already, right, and you got maybe some people who were tepid about, going for the women's game, but they know the men's thing's also there, you're going to get some of that crossover. You're going to get a big crowd for that, huge crowd for that women's national championship based on the people who want to see it, and then add on the people who are also there for the men's.
I would counter that, and that's no disrespect to the women's game, because I am a girl dad, so I root for all the women's sports to do a great job, and I hope they get to that level of the NCAA men's basketball tournament someday. At this stage, as we're recording here in 2024. I don't think that would work, because I've seen it happen in multiple events. Like locally here in Syracuse, they've tried to do it, and it didn't really work. They didn't get much of a crossover, to be honest with you. So and again, it's no disrespect. It's just a fact of what I've seen over the years. It hasn't worked to that degree yet. I think in the future it's a possibility, because you are right. The women's game is growing, and I'm very glad that it is. I mean, just the other day, I think it was yesterday, the day before, so this week, Caitlin Clark of Iowa just broke the NCAA scoring record, and she's been featured on a lot of different things, and I believe she's going to be a star in the NBA or in the WNBA. So like a female athlete to her caliber, that's helping grow the sport. So I hope they could get to that point someday where we had this whole weekend, and you know what, we're going to pack the place to the gills. there are some pockets in the country in our country that do pack it pretty well. Like UConn women, they're a pretty big brand. They fill the seats pretty well. I mean, I know the SU women here in Syracuse, they're starting to fill the crowds up a little bit more because here's the thing, they're pretty good right now. So, it's getting there. It's getting there.
They were historically bad when it comes to crowds. I can attest that. I've been there myself.
Yeah, they are, but they are. It is growing. It is growing because
the women. I've been to UConn women's basketball game, and yeah, it was like 13,000 people was at the stadium when I went, or the arena. Yeah, it was good. I didn't necessarily say that it would be like a super. I understand that they wouldn't draw the same, but I'm just saying like kind of having them like a good example, right? And I think this has probably happened before. I think I've witnessed it myself. When teams are both in the Final Fours, right, and you have to decide if you're going to go fly to Tampa to see the women play or fly to wherever Indianapolis to see the men's Final Four, right? If you kind of had them all under one roof, you kind of had them all kind of in that sense for fans to be able to.
I would say in the same city.
Yeah, so a good example, right? Indianapolis, right? The arena that's hosting this NBA All-Star game can host the women's Final Four that weekend, right? Obviously not going up against the same times. And then you have the stadium, right? I mean, so it's similar to like we talk about WrestleMania weekend. You know what I mean? You got Monday Night Raw and SmackDown in the arenas. You got WrestleMania, the big show, in the stadiums. They're obviously not going up against each other. Even the people who are competing with WWE are not going up against WWE. Nothing is on at the same time as WrestleMania. They're smart and they know that, right? If Ring of Honor or Impact or any of these other GCW are there, they're always running shows, in the afternoon or whatever it is. NXT similarly. So yeah, I think, kind of just conjoining all these things together, making it really, really huge kind of weekend. One thing I will say when it comes to drawing people in, and we can kind of tie this in together, do you think they're going, I guess, crowd-wise, what is your view when it comes to this WWE experience in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia? I mean, obviously, there's people who live there. There's millions of people who live there. They're going to go see this. But I don't know if you follow WWE on the social media channels as of late talking about this. But they're pretty much, they're not just putting it on the WWE Saudi Arabia Twitter accounts, right? This is advertised to me and you. This is like, hey, you got to come check this out. You got to fly here. How many people you think are going to essentially make WWE fans, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, on their list of things they got to check out? Like Star Wars fans now got to go to Disney World, and Harry Potter fans got to check out Universal Studios, and like all these kinds of things, or where the Hall of Fames are located. People fly from Florida to New York to see the Baseball Hall of Fame. Do you think there's going to be any big-time WWE fans that are going to put Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on their list of places to go to check out the WWE experience?
Well, obviously there's going to be some big time players that have the money, like the super fans, like the shirt guy and the guy that has the one country flag. I think the Trinidad and Tobago flag, like those type of people they're the heavy hitters. Like they clearly have the money and the resources to make it happen. I would say yes. But for if we're talking about us and great listeners and viewers of our program, I think the majority of them would say no, thank you. And here's the other thing, and considering where we are in the world with different things going on, with different conflicts, the Middle East is not really stable right now. I don't think it'd be a good idea for I don't think a lot of people will shy away from going to the Middle East until things maybe have settled down on a scale from a warfare kind of a scale. So I think right now the timing of it isn't great. If we can get to a point where the Middle East is stabilized, I mean,
I don't know Saudi Arabia's participation in some of these things, but I mean, to be honest with you, I'll be 100% frank, right, and be honest with you about the whole thing, right? Saudi Arabia, I don't think necessarily it needs to worry about other conflicts going on. It just needs to continue, and good for them, but they need to continue what they're doing, and that is stabilization of themselves when it comes to their outward impression for the world, right? I tell everybody else, people always talk about Saudi Arabia and the way that it is, and and I say, listen, yeah, it's not perfect yet. I don't know when it ever will be. I don't think any place ever gets perfect, but they're making that stride and they're making that move. I don't necessarily know when it would be official to say, okay, we can put Saudi Arabia up there with Italy and France and England and Australia and Japan. It's just places that are just on my bucket list of world destinations. I don't know when we're there. Good on them though for trying to do that. I mean, there's a lot of these other countries that aren't necessarily doing that. They're very far off, right? So
Yeah.
I guess, and obviously they have money, but other countries have money, but they're not making that effort. They're not making that concerted effort to try to advertise. I mean, like a good example is right with Russia. They've done a few things where they've brought in the Olympics and stuff before, but they at the same time are also not currently obviously like advertising their country to try to bring in WWE and UFC, and they're not bringing in like these golf tournaments, and they're not trying to like present. If I was born yesterday, I would look at Saudi Arabia as I look at England or any other country, right? I would have no other knowledge of them. So good on them for doing that, right? To the most educated person, they're a little skeptical, they're a little weary, right? Because this is all very brand new. You know what I mean? It's it reminds me a lot of like the legalization of like marijuana, because we're obviously old enough to remember, because it's only like a few years ago, right? Marijuana was treated a lot differently in the United States than it is now, and it's such a stark difference. It's just like eye-opening. You're like, what is going? Why are cartoons? Why are public figures advertising it like it's absolutely nothing? You know what I mean? That's just like it's not even just like it was maybe like 10 years ago when these like backwoods smoke shops were sketchy and selling it. Like, okay, it's legal, they can sell it, but it's still like presented in a dirty, dingy manner. It's very strange when it's like presented on like national TV as like without the cartoonish 420 marijuana pot leaf to go with it.
Well, speaking of cannabis, I mean, I don't know if you saw, I quote tweeted it or quote posted it, whatever they call it now on X. Ric Flair was at I think it was some sort of convention with Mike Tyson, and you can see Rick and Mike Tyson having a good time with a couple of marijuana. What do they call them? Joints, cigarettes.
Joints. All right, you're starting to sound more prude than me.
Well, I'm trying to keep it family friendly, all right?
But like so, so it's just such an eye-opening thing. So with Saudi Arabia right now, it is just like it's a little too much too fast, if you know what I mean. Like you're just not prepared to like, are we okay? What's going on here? Like you can't just flip the switch. I guess you got to kind of ease into the waters a little bit. But hey, I Saudi Arabia, I think probably in our lifetime, maybe sooner than later. It could be getting, a big pay-per-view that would be one that would draw people over, and I think that would definitely open some eyes. Right now we get the Night of Champions, the Crown Jewels, those kind of things. Saudi Arabia, I mean, if they had a WrestleMania there, I mean, that would be an event where not just it would be big, but it would open the eyes of myself and a lot of other people to really actually put that on the radar of going, wait, so we're really doing this, and that would be one thing. And same with other big events. I mean, I think what if Saudi Arabia maybe bringing over some NFL games, taking it back to that NFL talk we were having, and where you're not just advertising, because we watch the Saudi Arabia events. It's 99.9% Saudi Arabian people that are at these shows,
well, of course, yeah.
Right? So you start to do the thing in where you're bringing over like a WWE NFL game per year or an NBA game per year. Then all of a sudden we are bringing flying people.
I will say
over.
this too, to tie it to wrestling, even in another aspect of it. Saudi Arabia, I will give them credit. They brought in the Undertaker to do some things at a soccer pitch, like that.
Yeah, I did see that. He handed out the trophy, and I think Cristiano Ronaldo was on one of those teams and participating in the game. And obviously, he's a huge star.
Al Nassr, I think it is.
But we got to I guess you just got to get to the point where great for them and good for the people who live there. I guess that it is much better. But I don't know yet if they're to the point where people outside of Saudi Arabia are putting that on the list to come in.
It's a work in progress. I think the progress has been shown. Obviously, there's going to be some skeptics. I think it's still going to take some time, but hopefully down the line we'll get to a point where, like you just mentioned, it's on the same level as say other European countries.